Well, there have been, to my mind, two outstanding radio broadcasters over the years. There have been a lot of good ones, but two of them have been outstanding. One is John Arlott, the Englishman, and the other one is Alan McGilvray, the Australian. Now, two contrasting backgrounds there, because Arlott was a policeman who turned to radio broadcasting. McGilvray was the New South Wales Sheffield Shield captain, and one my father played against. So I followed Alan's career all the way through. He was an outstanding radio broadcaster.
We think he is the least biased, the fairest, and possibly the most professional of all broadcasters. And there's no doubt in my mind that that is correct.
The thing that I admired most about Alan McGilvray was when you were away on tour, he was a very proud Australian, and if we lost, it hurt him almost as much as it hurt the team, and if we won, he was just as happy as the team. So you felt that he was part of the team, and in fact, he basically was. We used to have a lot of good times together with him. We've woken him up a few times early in the morning, probably to our detriment, but it's always been a good relationship between Alan McGilvray and the Australian side.
We're watching Taylor go in now. Bennett hits it, he's caught and bowled, and that's the end of the match. Well bowled. That was a slow one. He pushed forward to it and spooned the catch back, and England have won this Test match and won it well. All out, 129. Bennett out for 11. Gilbert not out, no score, and the margin was an innings and 94 runs. England have won this Test match, an innings and 94 runs, and well done.
Just listen to the loudspeaker announcing about Alan McGilvray.
For retiring. It is, of course, the voice of Australian cricket, Mr. Alan McGilvray.
A lovely scene there with the crowd coming across the ground, waving at McGillis. He stands up and waves to them, but from all of us here in the box to McGillis, a very happy retirement, and we shall look forward to seeing you when you come back with the Australian team. I'm sure you will, even if only just to watch you. Always be welcome in the box, and thank you for all you've done for us.
When the game has just begun and they're looking for a run, there's just one voice for the cricket, so they say. He's everything to cricket.
Alan, it seems a long, long way from the excitement of the Oval in London to the peace and tranquility of your home here at Double Bay in Sydney. What's this life of retirement like?
3 days is marvellous. Well, 3 months will be better. It's been marvellous, Norman.
Well, Alan, I spent last night reading your book, The Game Is Not the Same, and quite honestly, I couldn't put it down. And it's a remarkable thing about it, you know, that you're going right back into the 1930s, and how do you remember things that far back? Your recall of incidents, even 30 or 40 years ago, is quite vivid. Now, is that your memory, or did you have a scrapbook or a diary?
A little bit of each, Norman. I have a diary and a lot of records, but strange thing about me, I'm often accused of being rude, because I don't remember people I met yesterday. And I am rude, because I haven't got a good memory. But I can remember cricket back 40, 50 years. Extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, what I liked about this book is the cover. Why did you choose the red and white ball on the cover?
Well, this was, I thought, well designed. It is, so the game is not the same. It's changing from the red ball to the white ball, which is used in one-day cricket. And so that is part of my story. The game is not the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, to tell this story, I think we have to tell it in 2 parts. First, the short chapter of Alan McGilvray, the cricketer, and then the very long chapter of Alan McGilvray, the broadcaster.
Grandma, Grandma, we honor you today. Grandma, Grandma, how homage shall we pay?
The first main association with the game occurred at Sydney Grammar, one of the best known of the city's great public schools. Early records describe Alan as a promising all-rounder, a punishing left-hand batsman, a medium-pace right-arm bowler, and an excellent fieldsman in any position. He played in the first 11, and he also displayed leadership qualities in his senior years when he was chosen as a school prefect. His great achievement as a player was selection for New South Wales, and he appeared in 20 matches, 12 of these as captain. Alan McGilvray, a cricketer respected by his teammates. Well, you completed your first-class career as the captain of New South Wales, and when you look through the book, it's quite remarkable how vividly you recall the first time you did something. For example, your first match for New South Wales.
Yes, that was a great experience. I shall never forget it. 40,000 people in Melbourne Cricket Ground. I walked out in the ground with Bradman. That was a dreadful feeling. I was so nervous. And of course, when I got out there and played a few balls, the crowd was saying to me, "Get out of the stripe, McGilvray, we want to see the little man." Of course they did. So my job there really was to be a runner for him, to feed him with the strike. That was my instructions from Alan Kippax, our captain. And I did that. He got an awful lot of runs. I forget how many, but I got a few. But it was a vivid experience to bat with the little man. I did several times after that, but that was my most vivid memory of my start in cricket.
Do you recall the crowd? I mean, when you have a crowd like that of 40,000, that must have been the first time ever you'd played in front of anything like that size.
Of course. When I went on the field and we were fielding, I went over to square leg to hide. I didn't know where to go. And Kippax said, "Come over here, laddie." And he put the ball in my hand and he said, "You're opening your bowling." Oh, look, I went back to that jolly mond in. I remember saying a prayer, "Let me bowl it straight, please." And I was so frightened. I thought I'd hit the square leg umpire with the ball. And I bowled first ball, and remarkable thing, I don't know what happened to it. I just tried to bowl it straight, and Ponsford moved forward to it. It went inside bat and pad. Oldfield thought it was going to hit the wicket, took his hands up in the air, and it missed the wicket.
You're talking about some wonderful names there.
Yeah, well, I didn't care.
Because later on you played with Bradman. You played with Bradman in that particular match, and then you played against him when he moved to South Australia. You were captain by then.
Yes, well, he moved. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been captain. And I did play against him in South Australia. He got an awful lot of runs there, 200 and something. And then in the Sydney Cricket Ground, the next match, we got him for a duck.
And what happened? I heard you had a bit of trouble walking off the field.
I did, really. They were hooting me. I had nothing to do with it. I just instructed the bowler and the fieldsman. But they blamed me. And as I got off the field and walked up to the dressing room, a big man, he was an enormous man, he grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me like a bag of chaff. And he said, "I came 350 miles to see Bradman bat, and you get him out for a duck. Every time my wheel turns on the way back to Wagga, I'll tell you, I'm going to say McGilvray, I won't mention what he said." But, I went down to Don in the dressing room. When he told me, well, it was at Adelaide, that he's going to get a lot of runs over here, because some people said in the paper, "He's finished." This is 1936. And he said, "I'm going to get more runs in that round match to show I'm not finished yet." And when we got him for a duck, I just said, "Well, just dream about that 300, Braddles, will you?" It was rude, and he looked down at me, and he was a very nasty look he gave me, and I deserved it. So I went down to the room, and I said, "Look, Don, I'm not so about getting you, but I am sorry for the ungentlemanly remark I made. It wasn't necessary. Will you accept my apologies?" And he just looked up at his cane chairs and he said, "There's always a second innings." And I knew then, if there was a second innings, he was going to get 300. Then unfortunately, the King of England died and the game was abandoned.
You had 7 Australian players under you at various times. Do you feel you had their respect when you were captain?
Absolutely. The best team man I ever played with was Bill O'Reilly. Now, he had every reason to be captain himself, but he came under me, and he said, "Mac, whatever I can do, I'm with you." And I'll never forget it. We were playing against England, MCC, and he said to me at about 3 o'clock, "I don't want to bowl anymore." Well, you never argued with Bill. There must have been something wrong with him. And I said, "All right, Bill." And he came at 5 o'clock, still 5 wickets to go. He said, "Give us that so-and-so cherry. I want to get these fellows out." He got the 5 wickets in the last hour. And I went in the dressing room, and so I was locker is next to mine. And he was taking his boot off. And I saw a bit of blood on the second sock, and the third came up with his toenail hanging to it. And I said, "That's all you're complaining about, Tiger." And he chased me around the locker, so he got me to kill me.
He always wore 3 pairs of socks, didn't he?
I believe so, yes. But if I remember, he used to use sunlight soap or some soap like that between the second and third for sweat. And he hit the ground so hard, Tiger. And this was sort of a shock for him. But when I did see him change, I always saw this pattern of behaviour from him.
Were you ever sorry that you didn't play for Australia?
Yes, I really was, but I wasn't good enough, Norman. My opponent, if you can call it that, in selection was Stan McCabe. Well, I might have been a little better bowler than Stan, but I couldn't hold a bat to him in his batting. No, I could never be in a position to replace Stan.
Well, you mentioned that match with Bill O'Reilly. That was, in fact, the game where you replaced Stan McCabe as captain, and you were the only state team to defeat Gubby Allen's touring team. Was that your greatest achievement in cricket?
Yes. I led the team out in the field, and we didn't think we had much chance against the time. That was a good side, 36. And we got up. But Mr. O'Reilly had a lot to do with that. He did, really. And so I owe him a great debt for that. That was my greatest achievement, to beat the MCC.
Well, now let's move from Alan McGilvray, the cricketer, to Alan McGilvray, the broadcaster. Here is Sir Charles Moses, who was the first general manager of the ABC.
Then came in 1930, came the era of Alan McGilvray, who was recommended to me by Monty Noble, the famous Australian captain. And I'd asked him for somebody who was, I felt we ought to have some experienced cricketer. And he said, well, I couldn't recommend anybody better than Alan McGilvray because, in my view, he's the best captain New South Wales has had. He himself had been captain of New South Wales and Australia. And he said his knowledge of the game and his judgment is very, very sound. And if you can get him to broadcast, the thing was then to make a broadcaster out of a very fine cricketer, which we certainly did.
Well, the year then was 1934. Can you remember your first broadcast for the ABC?
I do, in a Brisbane studio, putting me in an office with a red light and a green light. And they said, when the green light's showing, you talk. When a red light goes on, you stop. And I don't know how long I spoke, but I did it. I must have repeated myself dozens of times. That was the start, a first summary when I used to go up from the ground straight after every interval and do a summary of that session's play.
This was the broadcast box at the ground, was it?
That's right,
yes. Were you actually playing and sort of jumped the fence at the end of the day?
Yeah, I did. I was. It interests me, even then, just to say, now, I've got to talk about what we've done today. It rather attracted me, and then I went on from there. As simple as that.
Can you... was there any controversy about that? I mean, were you criticised for being a broadcaster and a player at the same time?
Yes, I got the message from a couple of members of the New South Wales Cricket Association. I shouldn't be doing this, and I suppose I shouldn't have been. But there was no rule to prevent me, and it was only mentioned, no, why don't you cut it out, Mac? But I thought, no, I was enjoying this. And, but there was a few people thought. That was maybe why they dropped me from the last match, which I wanted to play against England. I went to the three selectors, and I said, look, I'm not doing well enough. I should be dropped. But if you're going to drop me, can I retire? And they said, Mac, we'd never do a thing like that. Three of them did. And I got on a tram one day and reading the paper, and I said, how did this fella get on the side? It was me that was dropped.
So really you hadn't actually broadcast Test cricket at all, or any form of cricket, until the synthetic broadcasts, which occurred in 1938.
That's right.
Well, we've got a sample of this. Now, this was a synthetic broadcast, which was done specially for Fox Movie Tone News.
On the eve of the 1938 Test cricket series, I have been asked to explain to you how the synthetic ball-by-ball descriptions are broadcast by the national stations. Let us follow the course of a typical message as received in the Commission's Sydney studios only a minute after the actual happening on the Test ground in England. This cable is taken down in duplicate and immediately amplified by cricket experts who fill in details regarding field placements on model cricket fields for the commentator, whom you can now see broadcasting his description from the amplified cable information. As the shot is made, the effects man, who has in front of him a copy of the cable message, drops the needle on an effects record, and listeners hear the applause of the crowd as the shot reaches the boundary. And now, let us listen in.
Farnes bowling to Bradman. It's a short ball. Bradman moves back and pulls fiercely past square leg. Hutton running round from deep fine leg has no chance. The ball goes under the ropes for another 4. That's 4 more to Bradman, taking his score to 97. A typical Bradman shot, giving the fieldsman no chance of saving the boundary. Now Ames throws the ball back to Farnes. Farnes turns, runs in, bowling to Bradman. This ball well pitched. Bradman moves forward, drives. Cotton at cover tries to cut it off, but is beaten by the pace of the ball, and it races away for another 4. 4 more to Bradman, taking his score to 101. A century in 130 minutes, a glorious innings by us, and Australia is now building herself into a very sound position, assisted by a great knock by Bradman.
May I take this opportunity of wishing you all plenty of excitement and thrills in your listening to the 1938 Test matches.
The big problem was when they scored 1 run, to make sure you got the other man in next. Otherwise, 1 run takes him down to the bowler's end. Now and again we were calling a fellow wasn't batting.
What about the time you got the wrong Mac out?
Oh, that was dreadful, yes. 2 Macs, McCormick and McCabe. And the cable only had Mac. Caught somebody, bowled somebody. So I turned to Vic, he was sitting in the corner, and I said, who will I give?
That's Vic Richardson.
Yeah, Vic Richardson. And he said, I'll give it a stand. He's 200 and something, he's throwing the bat at everything, so I had McCabe out. And standing ovation for magnificent innings, and the crowd were cheering him, and I took him right into the pavilion, and then the next cable came McCormick. It was a dreadful sensation. I didn't know what to do. I just admitted it.
You know, one remarkable thing that I heard you do a synthetic broadcast of Len Hutton breaking Don Bradman's record, which was part of that 1938 tour. And your description almost exactly matched what happened when Hutton made the run.
I could visualise that. I knew what Bradman would do. He'd be the first to go up, and then the others surrounded him. And that wasn't far off the truth, really, but it was all done in a room.
Have you seen the film since? It's exactly what happened.
And now the big fella moving in. Yes, and there it is. At 4 to Hutton as he whips that one down towards third man, and Bradman moves in, and the first to congratulate Len as he comes back for that second run. He needn't bother. It's there.
Of course, cricket resumed in Brisbane, the first test of the series in 1946. Now, did that mean it was 12 years from your first broadcast in 1934 to your first actual test broadcast in 1946?
That'd be right, yeah. I remember, for one reason, that great man, Arthur Gilligan, we were broadcasting from the member stand, and he walked up the steps, and I was doing some talking, and then I saw this great Arthur Gilligan. I was working with Vic Richardson then, and to meet the man that I admired so much when I watched him play, and I had to talk with him. My goodness, he helped me a lot, both he and Vic. Of course, it was Vic and Arthur. I was only the small boy.
We'll come back to that combination in just a minute. Do you remember the occasion when Hammond walked out with the team in behind him and the batsman followed?
Yes, one of my greatest memories was Walter Hammond on the field. He was absolutely magnificent. I always call him His Majesty. He carried his body well, he wore his cap right. Everything about Walter Hammond was cricket.
There was a controversial incident in that match when Australia lost 2 quick wickets. They were 2 for 46. Lindsay Hassett came in to join Bradman. Bradman at 28, there was an appeal for a catch by Icon. What happened there?
It was a full toss. It was just landing, and Bradman chopped down on it and hit the inside bottom edge of the bat, hit the ground and flew to Jack Icon. Now, Jack took it, and then suddenly one by one of the slip fielders went up and appealed, how's that? Immediately I saw the ball hit. I called it not out. Players were all walking around saying he's out, he's out, he's out. But when I saw Hassett, I spoke to him and he said that's exactly as I saw it. I was not even concerned when the appeal went up, and I said, well, that's no problem. And I couldn't believe the fuss that went on. There was no doubt that Bradman was not out. And if they say he was cover driving, well, I've seen a few pictures of him playing that shot, and if he drove with his feet, well, that's an unusual shot for Don to play.
I've read a report that decision by the umpire could have altered the history of Australian cricket.
I've reason to believe that because the authorities that I have on it, or authorities, are with that mind. But Don never said it, I don't think. He certainly didn't say it to me, but in my mind I believe that might have been the end of Don.
And that would have changed cricket?
Oh, would it ever? Changed my life, really, with the way I used to enjoy his batting.
You mentioned before the fact that you worked with Arthur Gilligan in that match, and that was the combination of Vic Richardson, Arthur Gilligan, Alan McGilvray. One of the great broadcasting combinations of all.
Well, it was a household name, or names, Vic and Arthur, and it became known throughout Australia. They did more for cricket in those years. We were starved for cricket, of course, but they were the most popular combination that I've been ever associated with.
I can still remember as a kid the famous question, what do you think, Arthur?
Yeah, that's right. Everybody, what do you think, Arthur? And it was a common expression right throughout Australia.
Because we don't realise now, in these days of television, that radio was the only form of instant communication. What sort of ratings did you get for your broadcast then?
I believe at one stage, rating for 59.
59?
Now, I don't know much about ratings, but that's pretty high, isn't it?
Oh, it's phenomenal.
That's all right.
Of course, in 1946-47, Australia won the series easily. England still weak after the war. But the next domestic season in Australia, a tour by the Indians and a wonderful occasion in Sydney. Can you remember that match?
You mean Bradman's 100th 100, yes. I remember that well. I was broadcasting that. He came in with Miller, and the scoreboard showed this 99. Everybody was tense, and I think the captain was Amarnath, and he called in Kishanchan and gave him the ball. Now, it was tense, one run he wanted, and it was a hectic atmosphere. And just as he was about to bowl, the sporting panel called through on my earphones and said, and now we cross to Canterbury, to Lockie Melbourne. And the buzzer we have in front of us, pressed that madly. And I said, Bruce, come back, this is history. He crossed back to me, and I described the run.
Can you describe it now?
Yeah, he just went down the wicket. As soon as it was bowled, he went straight down the wicket, about a yard or two, and tapped it slowly to mid-on. I don't remember the first one. And he went off like a rabbit, and he said, come on, Nugget. And it was a pretty close run as far as Nugget was concerned, but he decided to go with him. And then, of course, to finish the early part of that, the horse had gone one furlong, And by the time they'd reached the 2 furlong mark, the finish, Bruce had got the run, and he'd got 100 runs to Bradman on the same, and he came and he says, now he crossed around me to Canterbury. And I ultimately heard that Charles Moses complimented Bruce Webber on that. That's what I want, initiative, you see.
Look at the crowd at the Sydney Cricket Ground to see Bradman.
That's right. Well, I've been out there and seen 10,000 people. Bradman goes in at 4 o'clock, 30,000 in an hour.
He was getting on in life. He was getting on to his 40th year, wasn't he? He was an old man as far as cricketers go.
I think he turned 40 when he was in England in 1948. And he still got 500 runs in the season.
And that was your first overseas tour?
Yes, it was. The greatest team tour I ever saw.
Why would you call it the greatest team?
It's so well balanced, batting and bowling. You had Ray Lindwell, Keith Miller, Bill Johnson. That's enough. And then they had Toshak and Ian Johnson. It was just a completely balanced side. The fielding was magnificent, Neil Harvey and the covers, everything about it. And, of course, they had a great captain. But when you look at a team like that, well, I wouldn't mind captaining that. Just you can have a bowl. And, of course, in England that time, they decided to have 55 overs before the new ball was bowled. Why England gave in on that, I don't know. There's Bradman using the 2 of them, swing in Loxton, come back to Lindwell and Miller. Now it's 90 overs.
In that tour, that 48 tour, surely the 4th Test at Leeds could rank as the greatest ever played as far as an Australian team is concerned?
Yes, unbelievable. It couldn't happen, but it did. I saw that pitch after the game, and when I was broadcasting from the top of the stand, I couldn't see Bradman's right foot. He was in about 6 inches. There was a hole there. And just down on a good length, for a leg spinner bowler, it was a great patch, about that much, what I suppose, 3 inches. And how he ever played that innings, 404 I think it was, and that's where Yardley got criticised, you know. He brought Hutton on early. He was the only leg spinner, and Bradman decided, and he told me about it later, anyone that could get in there, a slow bowler, would be trouble. So he went after him, and I think they scored 38. He scored mostly 38 runs off about 3 or 4 overs, and that was the end of Hutton. But Bradman put him out of business. On the day England were batting, the previous day, the crowd was very hot. And the crowd had encroached on the ground by about 3 or 4 feet. And that was the boundary line, although they were in from the boundary. The next morning, Yardley went to the curator and the umpires and said he wanted a line drawn 3 feet inside the normal boundary because he had the advantage of 3 feet. And he thought Australia should have the same privilege. Yeah, I think it was a tremendous thing to do. Yes, he need not have done it. Yeah.
Of course, it wasn't all Bradman. Was a fellow called Arthur Morris was with him, wasn't it?
What a combination. Now, Arthur was a beautiful player, and when a loose ball was bowled to Arthur Morris, he put it away, and that was why he was so great. So put Arthur in it, and Bradman, although Bradman, I'm giving Bradman the credit, and I should also give it to Arthur. And then that was Neil Harvey's match. He got 100, first match against England. He got 100 in the first inning, great test match. A lot of runs scored in that match, you know.
Well, England made 496 in the first innings, and you were still beaten.
Isn't that extraordinary? We try to get 250 in a day in these days, and they're battling.
Of course, the final test of that series was played at the Oval, a notable occasion, Don Bradman's last innings. We have the film now, and you can hear it with the commentary by John Arlott of the BBC.
Bradman. Now I ask you, is he any good? Don Bradman.
And Holly pitches the ball up slowly, and he's bowled. Bradman bowled Hollies, not. Bowled Hollies, not. And what do you say under those circumstances? I wonder if you see a ball very clearly. In your last test in England, the ground where you played out some of the biggest cricket of your life, and where the opposing team have just stood round you and given you 3 cheers, and the crowd has clapped you all the way to the wicket.
What would the effect have been of 4 more runs to Don Bradman?
It would have been an average of 100 in every innings he played in Test cricket. Now, what a performance that is. And he got most of those in about 130 minutes, you know. That's what we worked out. So it would have been a great thing, and he deserved that. But it didn't happen. But that's cricket, isn't it?
Well, the game had to go on, as it always does, without Don Bradman, and the next tour of Australia was in 50-51. Now, I'm going to play you a broadcast segment, you're describing the first 3 balls of the day's play in Adelaide in 1951.
First ball, Miller comes back and cracks it hard into the covers. It's through the covers now. Washbrook, Hutton is chasing it. It passes Washbrook. It goes out for 4. Betzer again to Miller. Miller cracks the next one. It's through again. Another 4. Now a very deep field as Hutton is left down deep in cover. As Betzer bowls to Miller. Miller short. This one's short and he goes through. And I think it's another 4er. It's past Washbrook. It's 4 again. And when look at he did to Freddie Brown in that tour. I think it was something, he got these wickets, that's right. And Freddie came in and he said, what are you doing out here? And he said, what are you fellas doing? He says, Nugget. He said, look, 25,000, give him a bit of amusement. He said, I'll keep the first 3 balls up to you. And the minnow one uncovers, go into it, make the crowd happy. And he bowled 3 to him. And Freddie duly hit him for 4. The next one hit Freddie on the head. And as he's down on the ground, Miller went up and Brown looked up and he said, what'd you do that for? He said, I said 3, not 4.
Well, of course, the modern-day people, a lot of them haven't seen Keith Miller play. They only know him as a sort of legend. You could compare him, I suppose, as an all-rounder with Ian Botham.
Yes, I could. That's bringing Botham right up into top grade too. But he isn't top grade in performances. People can say he didn't have the opposition. Well, there's a fair reason for that, but he's done it. But you put a Miller out there. Everybody watch Miller. The throw of his hair back off his forehead. I suppose you can do that with both of them, but they're 2 different characters, but they both do a big job in the great all-rounders.
But Australia hit a low ebb in 56 in England, and I think what might have been the greatest single bowling performance in history was Jim Laker.
It was 19 wickets, yes, on an unplayable wicket. That was not a fair wicket, and I went out with the members of the committee to look at this with Don Bradman, and it was a shambles. I could push the wicket up like a carpet, and it'd roll up, and of course Jim just bowled the ball and it would do everything. There was no way you could plan it. And I know the committee at the time were disappointed in the wicket they'd prepared. And since then they appointed a supervisor of wickets and it hasn't occurred again. But that was a mild, they call it. It's like a very fine manure. And they put it on and it just broke up.
But Laker was a great bowler.
In England?
Yes.
No, not in Australia. See, a man like Norman O'Neill started to take the bat out of him. I remember Norman O'Neill coming to me in the Perth club. I was playing snooker. I didn't know Norman O'Neill, and he came up and asked if I'd have a yarn about Laker. And he said to me, can I get to him? And I said, yes, you've got to be quick. And we talked about it at length, and I said, but you've got to watch the one he runs away in the air. And Norman said, I'll pick it up. Gave him an awful hard. He got 100 and something, and the ball was hitting the boundaries and bouncing off. Laker never bowled well after that, you know.
You know that I really felt for you as a broadcaster in that 1958 tour that you've just got to, where Richie Benaud took over. The Brisbane Test, England scored 19 before lunch. Now, surely that must have been the worst broadcasting you had to do in your life.
It was. Trevor Bailey was a contributor there, 4.5 hours, I think. He was batting, and I think he only got 18 to 19, something like that. And the total at the end of the day was 111, a full day's play. And old Trevor, he stuck around out there, wouldn't score a run. And I think Graham McKenzie decided he had to get over the 100. So I think he bowled 4 wide just to get past the 100. The players were disgusted. But that's the last time Richie Benaud let that happen. He went out there every day to win or lose, but do either well. That was his philosophy in life.
2 years later, the next match in Brisbane, of course, was the famous tied Test.
Rout skies him. 3 of them, 4 of them getting under it. Canhigh catches it and it's not! It's not! Paul and Canhigh ran in for it. 4 of them converged on the ball. Paul steps in off the mark. Shirt trailing behind him. Mecca pulls him high into the outfield. 4 runs. No, it won't get to the fence. They're going for the 3, though. Trout slides his bat behind the line. He's flying for it, and he's out. Run out! Run out! Run out! 2 runs only. Australia still requiring 1 run to win. And here's the single that wins the match for Australia. He's out! He's run out! Run out! The stumps are thrown down! Well.
Now, the commentators there were Clive Harburg and Johnny Moyes, but not Alan McGilvray.
No, I know. I wasn't there. I should have been. I got a slight reprimand from the general manager. Why wasn't I there? Because I was listed in a roster, but I said to Keith Miller and Bill O'Reilly, look, this is fading away. What about getting the 6 o'clock flight? Well, we've had a pretty hot time, and Keith said, yeah, let's go. And so Bill said, let's go. Bill said, I better stay. We went out to the airport, got into the pilot's room, No, they weren't listening to the cricket. They got aboard, and there was a Canadian or a Dutchman piloting the flight, and we sent a message up, could you give us a draft? No, they wouldn't listen. And I said, well, the hostess, 6:30 there'll be a summary by Johnny Moyes. Could we pick it up? No. And then, of course, when we arrived back in Sydney, Australia had won, and it was my wife and some hostess there, and I said, who won it? No one won it, and it was a draw. No, that wasn't what the man said, says the host. A tie. So Keith Miller written his article, Australia Coast to an Easy Win. We went over the telephone booth and rewrote the article.
Going on in that series, the West Indies won the second match, lost the second match, Australia won the third. Fourth was a draw, the fifth in Melbourne was the decider. Quite a remarkable incident towards the end of that match, which is known as the Fallen Bale incident. Yeah. And we can see that now on film.
Now, the controversial incident as Grout plays a stroke and sets off for the 2 runs. Alexander appeals to the umpire because the wicket is broken. The bail is on the ground, and Alexander is certain that Grout has been bowled. However, there's some doubt, and the umpires decide to hold a conference. They rule not out, to the amazement of the West Indians, and Grout is still there.
Now, what was your opinion of that?
I wasn't on the air at that time. I forget who was, but I was confused, but I couldn't understand why the bail had fallen. And then I asked Wally Grout after the game or sometime later, and I said, what happened, Wally? And he said, I don't think I hit the wicket, Mac. He said, the wicket was broken up badly, and I tried to cut the ball, and I hit the ground hard, and I think I disturbed the turf, and it rolled off, the bail. But I didn't hit the wicket. But he said, anyhow, it was some doubt. And I said, well, what'd you give your wicket away next ball for? He said, I didn't want to be in doubt. I thought I should have been out.
Was that the greatest series of cricket ever played?
To bring West Indians together, even today it's difficult. You know, there's great rivalry, even in not only cricket, in trade. Some things you can get in some island, you can't get in the other. So that was a real accomplishment for Frank, to unite the West Indies into one body of cricketers. No, that his leadership, and if I'm giving Frank credit, I must give it to Richie. Together, they did it. Not one of them, but both of them. They both played positive cricket. And that's why I say it's one of the greatest series I've ever talked about.
Well, from what you've told me, it's obvious you don't rate the Tide Test as the greatest match ever played. Can you name a better game?
I'd go back to 1961, Manchester, when Australia trailed by 177 runs on the first innings with 1 day to go. They led by only 150 and only had 4 wickets in hand. Well, on the last morning, David Allen, the off-spinner, took 3 wickets for 1 run, and Australia looked to be well beaten. Then Alan Davidson and Graham Mackenzie came together, and for this last wicket, Davidson took 20 off 1 over from David Allen.
Rooney's hit him high into the outfield for 6. 305 minutes left to play. And he hits that one very hard indeed for 4 runs between the bowler and long off. I don't think he worries so much about Mackenzie at that far end, but I see that the offside field is coming all in now to save 1, but they may not save 4. And there it is. Davidson's 50. He hits that high for 6.
When Mackenzie was bowled, the final wicket put on 98, and England needed 256 to win. I thought in that match that last day, Ted Dexter played one of the greatest innings I ever saw. It was the best innings I've seen in England in my life. It was a beautiful innings.
That's gone through it. Square cut, beautiful shot. 4 more. He's hit him into the crowd down. Magnificent shot over long on.
England reached a score of 1 for 150, and they looked certainties. Only 106 runs to get with 9 wickets in hand. Then Bonneau decided to bowl around the wicket, and he bowled into the rough, and there was considerable rough created by the bowler's feet.
He's bowled May behind his legs, has he? Yes, he's out. Bowled behind his legs. And the picture changes with a vengeance.
I must say it's the most extraordinary sort of batting at the moment from Brian Close.
Now he's hit him for 6. Yes, it's gone for 6. Just as he hit him. And he's caught behind square leg. It's almost inevitable. And Benno now to bowl to Subborough, who wants 1 for his 50. He's clean bowled. Subborough bowled by the last ball before tea.
The English wickets fell at 40, 150, 150, 158 and 163, a sensational collapse. Yes, he's caught by Simpson at slip. Murray caught Simpson, bowled Benno. Benno's now taken 5 for 53. Oh, magnificent catch by Simpson. What a fine catch. Left-handed there. He's a fine slip fieldsman. Stays on facing Davidson. Team ball. Australia have won and they've kept the Ashes.
Your name, the game is not the same. It certainly changes in the 70s. The 70s must go down as the most momentous era in cricket, with turbulence and violence and all sorts of things. And it started off with that 7th test in Sydney where Illingworth took his team off the field. Now, you were there. Can you describe what happened out there in the middle of that field?
I think I described it. It was a short pitch ball. It wasn't a bouncer that Snow bowled at Jenner that hit him and flattened him. He was down on the ground. And then everything broke loose with Illingworth going up to umpire Rowan and pointing the finger at him and telling him he should do this and this. And Rowan, a very quiet fellow, just replied to Illingworth by saying, "Look here, Mr. Illingworth, there's someone out here bowling bouncers, and I can tell you something, it's not me." Well, that was one of the hilarious things that happened of that very difficult time. But Snow was sent down to the boundary. I don't know why he was sending him right down to the fence, but he went right onto the fence, and then the spectator grabbed him by the sleeve, I think it was, and dragged him about a foot towards him. And that caused Illingworth to go up and talk to Snow. I imagine he said, "What happened?" And then they said, "Let's go." And they walked off the field, and as they did, cans and bottles flew on the ground, not aiming at anyone. They'd all gone then, but they just tossed everything they could over. Went into the dressing room. Umpire Brooks and umpire Rowan told Illingworth that unless he took the field, the 2 batsmen were still out there, unless he took the field, they'd declared the game Australia. And then they thought about it, and he said, "I will not go out on that field until those bottles and cans are cleared." And Mr. Rowan assured him that would be done, and that was done immediately, and Illingworth came back onto the field.
Well, that particular match and that series were very historic in terms of Australian cricket. Ian Chappell took over from Bill Laurie as captain in that last game. We had Greg Chappell, Dennis Lilly, Rod Marsh, all starting their careers in that series. And this ushered in a new era of Australian cricket.
Well, it saw a change in captaincy, a new look. So we had Benno with that same outlook of win. No prize in running second, he used to say to me. And then when we had Laurie didn't play as many drawn games as Simpson. But then we got Ian, and Ian had a new look. And he went out to win or lose. But he said, "I'll do either well, Mac." And that's the new look that came into the game. And that's, as I saw Ian, a very good tactical captain. Mm. And it changed the game.
Of course, the 1974-5 series in Australia was the explosive one, the Lilly Tomo series. Have you ever seen fast bowling like that before?
No, that was shock bowling, wasn't it? I imagine it would be like Larwood and Vose, without the same field placing. But it was the Englishmen didn't like it at all, and who would anyhow? Tomo firing them at you that way, and that great bowler Lilly coming in with better control than Tomo. But Tomo was a problem, you see. They never knew when they were going to get one of their heads or one of their toes. But they knew Lilly was going to be fairly consistent at keeping the length. But Tomo was just a fire eater. He just loved bowling fast, and he was very, very fast.
Well, I want to play a little videotape item here, and I'm sure this is going to bring a smile to your face. It happened in Perth in the second test of that series. It was the last ball of the day, and Willis was bowling to a young man called Doug Walters. Doug Walters, 97. Here's the last ball of the day's play. He hit it, could be four. Magnificent shot. It's out to the boundary. A six, was it? A six. A six. Walters, 103. What a fantastic finish. One of the greatest finishes we've ever seen to a day's play in Australian Test cricket. Doug Walters, 100 in the session. He hit the last ball of the day's play for 6, and he's on to 103.
One thing about Dougie, I always knew if he's beaten by a ball, he'd say, let's have the next one. That's history. And he never let a ball that beat him trouble him, and he went on as though that nothing happened. They dropped him in England, didn't they? But I think he asked for it. And he said he wasn't doing well enough, and he didn't do it very well. But I think Dougie went to Ian and said, look, give some of the younger fellas a go. But I understand that the team meeting they had, he gave one of the finest addresses to the team, and set him to pull himself together and really got behind Ian. And although he was dropped, he didn't take it badly. He just went on with the team and said, no, I can't do it, you fellas do it.
Alan, you've described Don Bradman and Richie Benno as captain, but Ian Chappell, a entirely different type of person.
He was, very much so. I must say he didn't quite have the dignity of Don, because some of the things he did on the field, well, I would rather he didn't do them. I think he regrets them now too. But I mean, you'd go out in the field with 20 captains and some centenary, and he'd have a mauve or purple suit on, you see, that sort of thing. He did it. He just said to me, Mac, I won't conform.
Yeah, but he still gets your number one vote, Ian Chappell, of the three.
I mean, if you've asked me a tough question there, Bradman was very well equipped after the war, but not so well equipped before the war in attack. Ian had some good fortune with the bowlers he had. I think I'd have to put it all together and say, I'd like to separate. I wouldn't like to separate them, but if I was choosing a captain of the age group that Ian was in, I think I'd have Ian.
Because he didn't captain the team for very long. It was only a matter of about 4 years, and he actually stood down in favour of his brother Greg. You remember that?
That's right. He did that up in Brisbane, I think. That's when Greg got 100 in each innings.
That's first only captain to do that, isn't it?
He could have well got it before Greg, but not for Ian now. And so, no, there's my young brother down there, I've got to look after him. Yeah, that's how he thought about players. That's only one example of the many things he did.
So, because Greg, looking at your book, Greg took over then and kept going, and the great single match of the 70s must be the Centenary Test.
Yes, it was.
The Centenary Test, a wonderful occasion.
It was an extraordinary game, you know, that Australia were out for 130-odd, and then England all out for 90-something, and the game was all over. And if you remember, the Queen and Prince Philip were going to drive around the ground on the last day. And they said, there's not going to be a last day with these scores. And they were busily trying to arrange another fixture so that Her Majesty would come and she'd see the game. And this was all planned. And then, of course, both sides got over 400 in the next two innings. And the game went right almost to the death, didn't it? Australia won by 45, yeah.
Exactly the same as the first
That's
test.
right. Yeah.
We found a remarkable still photograph of you, which was taken at the exact moment that you made this little piece of description.
This ball from Greg Chappell to Amos. Beats him, bowled him, a good one, a slow one, whipping back on him. He may have touched it, I don't think so. I think it came straight through. It was either a touch or the bat or the pad.
One interesting point about that Centenary Test is that Derek Randall was made the player of the match. Now, I believe you were one of the judges for that, weren't you?
I was, yes. I voted for Randall at 5 o'clock. But then Lily went on from 5 till 6, took 4 out of the 5 wickets to fall to win the match, and that gave him 11 for the match. But I'd put my vote in at 5, and I went straight down to the people that were concerned, and I said, I want to change my vote. And they said, we can't, Mac, it's all gone up to the board or association. And I said, well, I want to change it. And they said, no, you can't. But I said from then on, I was asked to do that job several times after, and I would not give my vote until the end of the game. At 5 o'clock, Randall had the title, but at 6 o'clock it didn't, in my book. But I believe someone else wanted to change it too, but they wouldn't change it.
Well, soon after that, and you devote a lot of time and space to this in your book, is the break-up with World Series cricket.
Well, I was at Hove in Sussex, and then the news came through, and there were interviews and cameras flying around, and would I say this, and others were being interviewed. And there were two members of the board there. And I kept talking to them, and they say, well, we're not going to stand this way. Everything was being said in the heat of the moment. And I remember one of the board members said, well, shut the door right in his face. And I said to him, don't ever shut a door, leave it ajar. And because I believed that could have been overcome. It was then decided to play 2 tests at the same time as Australia were playing India and Australia. And I believe had that compromise, had it compromised on it and just thought about it and said we could have done it both together. We could have played the World Series and the Test matches. But I think World Series decided to put the games on at the same time, and that fell apart the whole lot then, you see, so it was a complete breakup.
Yes, it was a very emotional and bitter period, wasn't it?
Oh, always it was. A dreadful period there. And it was all done so secretly. Well, it could have been opened, and discussions could have taken place around the table, but it didn't happen.
Well, you've been described quite often, I suppose, as a traditionalist. What about one-day cricket?
I find it hard to do. I'm more of a tactical broadcaster. I try to plan things, and I've been lucky to have commentators with me like Hass and Johnny Moyes and Arthur Gilligan, where you try to foresee something and create an atmosphere of anticipation. And that you can do that in a test match. But when I see men like Lilly going into bowl with no slips, making no attempt to get the batsman out, that to me lacks any planning. It's just, he's only cannon fodder, and he's got no, that's where he gets his wickets, behind the wicket, and slips for the most part. And he's deprived of the opportunity of getting wickets at the expense of saving runs. Now, when they get to the stage of saying, no, well, let's get a few wickets and plan it early, but you said the whole pattern is now four inside the circle and so on, goes on after 15 overs, all these rules have come in. And I don't think it's planning, and when you get towards the end of the innings, how many times have you seen it to Norm? Just a wild slog at everything that comes on, and that to me, you can't plan anything, you can't talk about it. There's nothing to give to the public, and there's no sense of anticipation except the first hour and the last hour. Then the game becomes alive.
Yeah, but you're not saying that it's not entertaining.
No, I'm not saying that at all, no. I mean, how can I say that when I see the thousands that turn up to it? It's answering a public need, and they're providing it. Full marks to them for that, but I think it could be better arranged and better planned. And wickets are as important as runs. If they ever come to some solution that they can give the bowler some credit or some help, then I think the one-day game will be the better.
Well, the turmoil wasn't only in Australia. In fact, it went right around the cricket world. And that occasion that you had in the West Indies, which was the riot, which was in fact caused by the breakaway of World Series cricket, wasn't it?
That's right. Mr. Packer attended the conference in Guyana. He flew down there to meet them. Nothing came of that. And then, but they played the first 2 test matches with the full complement of the World Series players. And then the cricket board in West Indies had no alternative to do what they did. Were they available to go to India or not? And if they wanted to play this series, they couldn't go to India. And so they said, no, we're going to play World Series. And so that broke up the team. And that broke up the people. The final test was Kingston, Jamaica. And a very nice fellow, Van Holder, very nice fellow. And he was given out, caught, and he didn't go immediately. And he stood there for 2 or 3 seconds. And then he walked off. But that was enough. The crowd jumped, everyone, the fields, bricks came over, and I'm sure they must have had a sling, but there were house bricks coming in, and they were coming about 80 yards, 90 yards. Well, no one can throw a house brick 80, 90 yards, so there must have been slingers outside, and they were lobbing over near the pavilion, and the players stood there. Why, gee, they were lucky. And then Fred Bennett went out, the manager, and then Jerry Alexander, the keeper, he went out to try and control them. No way. And then they brought the police in with revolvers. Well, this is good. And then they fired a few rounds up in the air, and there was no intention to hit anybody. And then they had the dogs. Boy, those dogs get hold of you, kill you. And I remember saying to Fred Bennett, the manager, that's a bit dangerous. Oh, he said, they're only blanks. And I said, did you ever serve in the army, Fred? He said, no, I was too young for that. I said, well, blanks don't sing when they go over your head. And I can give you that. And then I broadcast with my briefcase, and I broadcast through the handle. There was a brick wall underneath, and I had the handle, and I told Australia what was happening.
ABC, Alan McGilvray here. The riot's still going on. There's the police are out in the middle, a lot of bottles still all over the ground. I don't know what Simpson's going to do, but the manager, Mr. Bennett's out there in the middle. Well, they're not in the middle. They're well away from where those bottles and stones are being thrown. And the police surround them as they leave the ground. Now ball bottles are coming, and they took out the bottle off the ground, and they're being rained with bottles. But hundreds of bottles are pouring on there. The players are diving for shovels, and they're in under cover. Now, all we see on the field now are dozens and dozens of police. And as they run off the field, they were showered. And the umpire's been taken off under protection. This is not funny.
I didn't know that the radio station in Kingston had taken that broadcast and broadcast to the people. And because I was then accused of, everything. We heard you, and I tried to go out of the box, 20 feet up we were, and about 6 or 8 men down there, and they had bricks in their hand, and they said, you go back on there, white man. And I went back all right, smartly, and I waited for about half an hour, had another look. There was about 4 or 5 of them gone, but still half a dozen there. And I went next door box with Jackie Hendricks, who was the wicketkeeper and captain of West Indies, a very good friend of mine. And I said, look, come on, let's walk, Jack. And I got over to the member stand, and the policeman came up, you white man fool. You white man fool. And I said, there's no problem. And he says, you never, man, a knife. 50 people around you, a knife, no one knows. You go, you dead, you fool man. I said, I never thought of that a lot.
Well, just looking through the pages of your book, there's one word which stands out to me, and that's dignity. Now, do you believe the dignity of cricket has been maintained or not?
Well, I know I'm a square, and I see no reason to change my views because of other people doing things that I didn't do or don't like. I don't ask them to get into other clothes or clean their shoes. It's not my business. But you asked me the question, I think, no, that they just could have a better image of cricket. I think they've taken commercialism and enjoyed the intake of money. But I don't think you'd find that chaps that I played with, the O'Reillys, the Kippacks and the Bradmans, would do that.
Well, your last series in Australia, of course, was 1984-5 with the West Indies, and the sensation of that series was the standing down of Kim Hughes, and you were right in the middle of that.
I became involved, not for what I did and said, but what some people in the press wrote about me. You see, I did a recording in City Extra, I think it was, and it was written up in a paper over the front page. But they didn't create the meaning. You see, I said that Hughes is, he's a small boy amongst men, something of that light. And that was always quoted. But I said, actually, in those broadcasts, he's a small man amongst men, having mentioned the Bradmans and the Woodfulls and the great captains of my time, and he hasn't grown up to their stature and captaincy. But a paper can distort it by using only part of the sentence, and I came into a lot of criticism about that when I actually meant his inexperience was so evident in the captains I've seen, the Chappells and Bennos and the Bradmans and the Woodfulls.
Have there been times when you've been sorry you've said something?
Yeah. Yes, I am sorry for some of the things I said, particularly in relation to Lilly at Perth when he had the Meandad incident. I said the question was asked me quickly, how long should they suspend him for? I said 10 years, something like that. It wasn't my business. It wasn't my business to say that. It was my business to say, well, that's up to the board. But I wasn't quick enough, and the question came too quickly. No, I regret saying that. But not a lot of things. A couple of things I could go back at night in the bed and say, well, I wish I hadn't have said that. And then it gets in your brain and you don't sleep because it worries you. But that's one of the things I could have done without you.
Well, to say goodbye to you as a broadcaster, I think nothing would be more appropriate than to go to the very ground where you saw your first Test match. It was in 1924-25, and you made your last broadcast there, 60 years later, in 1985 in January. And this was the occasion, the final broadcast by Alan McGilvray of a Test match in Australia.
Haven't got the time. There's a game of cricket going on, and it's far more important than me. Behind the mic. And I just say, finally, the score is 8 for 242. Thank you all. And the crowd here today who stood and gave me a great ovation, to you all, I thank you. I've enjoyed it. I have been a very lucky man in life to have cricket as my life, and it has been. So I think, Max, I'll leave it with you, and I'd like to leave the air now with those thoughts. So will you take over, and Mr. Marks, will you get someone else to continue the commentary? Thank you very much, everybody here today that gave me such a splendid ovation. Goodbye to you all.
Well, the game is not the same, and we close the book at page 188 for the last time. And just before we go, are there any particular people that you'd like to pay a tribute to during your life as a broadcaster, or during your life at all?
Many, many, many people, but primarily my family. My father met me, well, my relatives up the station. We were going to Adelaide, and I was going to get 1,000 runs and 100 wickets on the tour. I was 12th man in Adelaide and got none for 140 in the next match. So, but they were all so keen, and I remember my father saying, "No, you're on a new threshold of life, my young man. Make the game the better for being in it." That had a great meaning. It backed me right through my life. And then my mother. I was a stutterer. I couldn't get 2 words out when I was 15 years of age, and she made me read to her, and she was bedridden at that time, and then sent me to a musical course. She said harmony of that, and I was cured. And then from my wife, and then to my daughter. Caroline she came to England with me. She did a lot in that book, and I wanted her there for research and everything else, and she did that. And then my wife was a great help. She'd ring me in England, you know, and I'd be there. Why don't you wake up to yourself? You get animation in you. And that was a family, I think, was a great help. And basically they got me on the road, and so I'm grateful. And of course players, Vic Richardson, Gilligan, Hassett, Moyes, you know, I could name dozens, Norman. Tremendous help. I've been lucky, man.
You always preferred to be a radio broadcaster and not television.
Well, it appeared, and I think Moses would have thought this, and I had some ability to put a picture in words, evidently, and I believe that I had to put a picture in a lounge room or car by word of mouth, not by camera, and I couldn't adjust myself to change of style, which is you so well, and having done both, it's not easy to do. You can't do both in the same day satisfactorily. And so I thought, on the guidance of a couple of people that I talked to about it, and they said, well, you seem to have that ability, Mac. Stay with it. So I never did television, not for 20 years.
Well, radio broadcasting is a team game, same as the game of cricket itself.
Yeah.
Are there any particular people that broadcast with you in that professional sense who you'd like to pay some little tribute to?
Yes, well, the ones I mentioned, my summarisers from Gilligan Richardson, and then on to Lindsay, Johnny Moyes, John Arlott, Brian Johnson. Gee, I'm missing a lot. I'm trying to think quickly, but I have had so much help. And even on the last tour, the BBC were absolutely marvellous to me. There wasn't one thing I could say that I wanted that wasn't done, and done with a great deal of pleasure.
Well, it's nice of you to say that, because just to close off, I know you've had hundreds of letters and messages and phone calls. You've had farewells by lots and lots of peoples and presents given to you. I think the most appropriate way to say goodbye for the last time is to go back to the BBC dinner in London and hand over to Brian Johnston.
So from behind the curtain appears a decanter which says Alan McGilvray with marvellous words on it. It's just what I've said, with affection and appreciation, BBC, and someone on the other side who I think you will recognise.
Yes,
you will recognise the great man.
Yes, I do.
Now, what we haven't told you is this is a very peculiar decanter. It is a magical decanter. And I'm going to ask whether we might just hear something from the gentleman there. Are you there? Sharply long enough. All right, well, we just see whether we can hear his voice if I undo this very slowly and draw it out.
I am pleased to have an opportunity of paying tribute to Alan McGilvray at the conclusion of his career as a Test cricket commentator. About 50 years ago, we played together on the cricket field. Alan could fairly be classified as a good all-rounder who had a splendid knowledge of the game, and his experience in the middle as competitor and captain was undoubtedly an asset when he turned to broadcasting, because there are many subtle differences between watching a game and actually taking part in it. By a coincidence, Alan ended his broadcasting career at the Oval, the scene of my farewell Test appearance. There was a vast difference in our respective performances. I lasted a mere 2 balls, whereas Allen's innings was only terminated by the end of the match, and then voluntarily. That one man could have a successful and honourable career at the microphone, extending over 50 years, is quite astonishing. It happened mainly because Allen stuck rigidly to those essential qualities of integrity and impartiality which brought him goodwill and acclamation from all cricket-playing countries. Not least was his understanding of the needs of those untold thousands of listeners who never had the opportunity to watch Test cricket, but who depended on the spoken word for their enjoyment of the game. A meritorious and noteworthy career has ended. I join with his legion of friends and admirers in congratulating Allen on a job well done. May he long enjoy the leisure he so richly deserves.
Lindsay, your old partner in broadcasting, Alan McGilvray, has just retired. Have you any comment to make about that?
Well, in a way, it's a pity, of course, but Alan's had a pretty good innings. He's done his job magnificently over a long period, and I hope he has a very happy retirement. We're going to miss him.
Alan, to me, has always been supreme. He means Australia. I mean, I can remember him with his voice crackling over the airwaves in England that cold winter, 46, 47, immediately after the war. When I was young and one heard Alan's voice, it was Australia, it was cricket, and green baggy caps were marvellous.
Alan has been the Don Bradman of the microphone, and proudly he retires with a reputation in broadcasting just as remarkable as Bradman's was at cricket. None would argue that the game won't be the same without Alan McGilvray.